Kia ora, welcome to the recorded lecture on connective tissues, and specifically we're going to look at fascia and the fascial system. Fascia is connective tissue that, in terms of shape, can be a sheath, so surrounding. It could look like a sheet, or any other dissectable aggregations of connective tissue. Aggregation means like a series of connective tissue that is coming together, and it's structures that form beneath the skin to help attach, enclose, and separate muscles and other internal organs. There's quite a lot of examples of different types of connective tissue or fascia within the body. I guess the main thing to take home from this is that it's this continuum of soft, collagen-containing, fibrous connective tissue. Collagen is the most abundant type of protein within connective tissue, and there's different types of fibers which sort of determine the structure of what fascia is like and its properties. Examples of things like adipose tissue, surroundings of nerves and blood vessels. We've got deep and superficial fascia, things like the different connective tissues that surround structures within a muscle. So if we think of the endomysium surrounding a muscle fiber, and then the perimysium, which surrounds a whole fascicle, and the epimysium, which surrounds a whole muscle. So you can think of connective tissue as completely permeating through a whole muscle tissue, but then that also creates our tendons, and similar kind of structure which creates our ligaments. So very diverse kind of tissue, but it surrounds, interweaves between, and interpenetrates all organs, muscles, bones, and nerve fibers. And this allows the body to function as a full system in an integrated manner. So it's really important, and it's a type of tissue that really provides the link between all other tissues within the body. Here's a really good sort of analogy of how we could think about fascia. On the left you've got an orange, and I guess within that orange you can see all the different types of sinew within it that helps bind that orange and keep it together as one. Essentially, so it is quite diverse and complicated, but essentially if we think of connective tissue as comprising of two basic ingredients, cells, which drive what the connective tissue does and produces, and then the extracellular matrix, which is the framework that gives structure to connective tissue. Different types of cells within each type of connective tissue depending on what it is. Fibroblasts are the most common connective tissue cells. So if we think about some terms we know, like osteoblasts. Osteoblasts are bone cells which are connective tissue build. So fibroblasts are also building cells. So they secrete fibers and ground substance, which helps build that extracellular matrix. And the formation of this extracellular matrix determines the properties of any particular connective tissue. So in this example, osteoblasts build bone material, whereas chondroblasts build cartilage. So whatever those cells produce will determine the structure of this extracellular matrix. And then if you think about like what a tendon would feel like compared to what a bone would feel like, but they're both types of connective tissues. Just some other examples of cells within connective tissue. Endothelial cells, so within blood vessel walls. Mast cells, if you remember from our immune system topic last semester, produce histamine and trigger the inflammatory response. Plasma cells and lymphocytes and macrophages are all types of white blood cells, and then our fat cells, which are adipose tissue. Also, all of those are examples of cells within connective tissue. So the ground substance within the extracellular matrix is its function is to hydrate connective tissue cells and the fibers, allowing movement, a glide to happen between those structures, and it provides medium for intercellular exchange. So intercellular exchange is communication between different cells. Intracellular exchange would be within the cell itself. In terms of substance, it's like water, and it has large organic molecules, and it's like egg white consistency. So it's sort of like that gooey kind of consistency. Within connective tissue, you'll have fibers, and the nature of the fibers will determine the properties of the connective tissue that you're talking about. So elastin, thin, flexible fibers capable of being stretched, so they can stretch 2 times their length without being damaged. They provide connective tissue with elasticity, and if you think about a musculotendinous unit, so our muscle fibers and our tendons, there is a big component of elasticity in that. Reticular fibers, they form like a mesh kind of framework. That kind of framework is really good for supporting, so supporting structures like our nerve cells and our blood vessels. And then collagen, which is the most abundant type of protein in the body, provides tensile strength really strong, similar to like steel wire, but it provides structural and functional integrity. So it gives connective tissue strength and functional integrity. So functional meaning usable integrity. Collagen bands can be parallel, braided or packed, or whipped depending on the connective tissue type. So they're most abundant, but also quite diverse in terms of how they can be structured. On the left we have these collagen fibers that are waiting to be hydrated, I guess, and then under hydrostatic pressure, so under pressure from water, the fibers are pulled tense, and that tension helps resist compressive forces. So if we think about soft tissue, so this is not just connective tissue, but muscle and connective tissue as a unit, because you cannot separate those 2 types of tissues. They are separate in terms of categorizing, but they function together. So properties of soft tissue. Soft tissue can be stretched, so it can be lengthened without being damaged. So if you think about putting a client through passive range of motion, you can do that without creating injury in an uninjured joint. Elasticity, so there's an ability to recoil or rebound to an original length or shape. Put muscle under a big stretch, we'll want to come back to something that it knows. And then plasticity is the capacity to be altered and retain that new shape. Creep is a term where if soft tissue is put under a different, like a slow force over time, it can maintain that shape. And so how I think of it is everybody has a normal posture that feels normal to them, and it will be determined a lot by positions that you hold over a long period of time. So if you think of like the modern lifestyle where we're often seated, hunched forward, looking at our devices, working on computers, driving, that shape becomes our normal. That posture becomes what feels normal, and to actually sit up straight and tall feels like work because you're working against what's your new normal. So that's why moving is really, really important. And the best saying about ideal posture is the best posture is the one that you move to next, meaning you should be moving all the time so that you don't get into these poor fixed postures. But also encouraging people to move through ranges of motions helps avoid a normal that is conducive to like chronic injuries, especially around back, hips, neck, kind of stuff. Flexotropy is a property that soft tissue can respond to a change in temperature. So heat helps to decrease, what's the term when about the thickness of liquid? viscosity. So under temperature, you can help transform sort of gel-like substance into a bit more of a liquid and provide a bit more ability to move. And then tensile strength is the ability for soft tissue to be pulled in different directions and withstand force. So things like torsion, which is twisting, and compression. Uh, the piezoelectric effect is the production of a charge when mechanical stress is applied. So we are electrical in terms of we have nervous tissue which provides the ability to send and receive messages. We can produce an electric charge through an application of mechanical stress. And colloidal is when solid particles are suspended in fluid, and they have the ability to be both flexible and virtually incompressible when a rapid amount of force is applied. This is if you played around with, I think it's corn starch and water. When you mix water and cornstarch together and play around with it, it's like this gooey stuff. But then if you hit it and compress it and roll it really, really hard, it'll be like a solid. And then you stop and it will turn into this liquidy goo. It's the closest thing to magic, I guess, but there's science behind it. Just like any part of the body, we can classify fascia various ways. So one is in terms of anatomical location, so superficial and deep, meaning close to the surface or further away from the surface, visceral and parietal, and further classification according to anatomical location. So we'll break up this stuff in a little bit more detail. Superficial fascia means close to the surface, found directly under skin. So fat connective tissue helps anchor skin down. If we think about those different layers of the skin, the epidermis and the dermis are the two layers of the skin, and then underneath we have the hypodermis, which is actually not technically a skin layer, but that helps keep our skin down in place. Deep fascia is the stuff that's deeper than that superficial layer of our skin. Surrounds bones, muscles, nerves, blood vessels, high fibrous consistency, lots of blood vessels. That's what vascularized means. Two different subtypes: aponeurotic fascia, which are like sheets, big surface area, white fibrous tissue, and they allow for large or wide attachment sites. So the linea alba, I believe, is also is one example which keeps your rectus abdominis together. Epimysial fascia is the different types of connective tissue layers that surround muscle fibers, muscle vesicles, and then a whole muscle. A couple of examples of fascia covering the IT band down the side of the leg. Parietal fascia compared to visceral fascia. The parietal fascia lines the walls of body cavities. So cavities are a space. So we have connective tissue that provides those walls. And visceral fascia surrounds organs and cavities. So we've got cavity wall linings and then linings that surround organs themselves. And here's just a breakdown of these different types of connective tissues in terms of properties, structure, and function. And it's quite a nice infographic to follow that.